Have you ever wondered why some dreams come true too easily? When something seems perfect, too perfect, there's often a dark reality lurking beneath the surface. Welcome, brave souls, to another chilling tale from the Nightmare Maestro. Tonight I will share a tale that will make you question every creak in your home, every misplaced item, and every door you thought you locked. Because sometimes, the perfect home isn't perfect at all. And by the end of this story, you'll never look at an open house the same way again. The autumn sun cast long shadows through the leaded glass windows of 47 Oakwood Heights Drive as Hannah and Arthur Wilson stood in the foyer, their footsteps echoing on the herringbone hardwood floors. At $450,000, the Victorian-style house was nearly $200,000 below market value. A price point that seemed impossible in this prestigious development, where similar homes routinely sold for over $700,000. The real estate agent, Miss Reynolds, moved through the rooms with practiced efficiency, her heels clicking against the floors as she highlighted the home's features. Her red blazer stood out against the neutral walls as she explained that the previous owners had relocated overseas suddenly, creating an urgent need to sell. The property had served as the development's model home for 6 months, showcasing the builder's craftsmanship to potential buyers. Hannah ran her hand along the custom crown molding, feeling the precise edges beneath her fingertips. The gourmet kitchen gleamed with high-end stainless steel appliances, quartzite countertops, and a massive island that seemed to have materialized directly from her Pinterest board. Arthur stood at the kitchen window, admiring the privacy fence that enclosed the meticulously landscaped backyard. Everything was immaculate, as if the house had been waiting just for them. Even the smaller details felt perfect. The way the afternoon light streamed through the bay windows in the living room, the subtle coffered ceilings in the dining room, the built-in bookshelves that flanked the gas fireplace. The main bedroom suite featured a sitting area and a spa-like bathroom with heated floors. The home office, with its wainscoting and large windows, would be perfect for Hannah's growing consulting business. They made an offer that same day, their hearts racing with excitement when Miss Reynolds called 3 hours later to say it had been accepted without counteroffer. The inspection revealed only minor issues: a loose gutter, a slightly squeaky floorboard, a door that needed realignment. Within weeks, they held the keys to their dream home, their minds already filled with plans for dinner parties and holiday celebrations. If only they had wondered why such a perfect house was priced to sell. If only they had asked more questions about its history as a model home. If only they had noticed how Miss Reynolds' smile never quite reached her eyes when she handed over the keys. The first signs were so subtle that Hannah almost convinced herself she was imagining things. 3 weeks after moving in, she descended the stairs one morning to find a coffee mug in the kitchen sink. Ordinary enough, except she distinctly remembered emptying the sink before bed. Arthur denied leaving it, but they brushed it off as moving stress affecting their memories. But then the small things started accumulating, like dust motes gathering in a shaft of sunlight. The throw pillows on the living room couch would be arranged differently than Hannah remembered leaving them. The blue geometric one centered instead of angled, the cream chenille moved to the opposite end. The kitchen towels, which Hannah usually draped casually over the oven handle, would be folded in precise triangles, hospital corners, crisp and perfect. Arthur dismissed her concerns initially, but Hannah kept a mental catalog of these tiny disruptions. The thermostat would be adjusted 2 degrees cooler than their preferred setting of 72. Their Netflix queue showed movies in the continue watching section that neither of them had started, usually old classics or foreign films they'd never choose. The garage door would sometimes be unlocked when they were certain they'd secured it the night before. The changes were always small, always explainable. Perhaps Hannah had adjusted the thermostat and forgotten. Maybe Arthur had started watching those films during his occasional bouts of insomnia. Possibly the garage door mechanism was faulty. Each incident in isolation seemed meaningless, but together they formed a pattern that made Hannah's skin prickle with unease. She began taking photos of rooms before going to bed, comparing them to the morning scene. The differences were subtle, but undeniable. A chair pushed in. Slightly closer to the dining table, books aligned at a different angle on the coffee table, window blinds adjusted by a fraction of an inch. The changes suggested not random disturbance, but careful, deliberate adjustments, as if someone else had their own particular way of keeping house. The evidence became impossible to ignore when food started disappearing. Not entire meals that would indicate an obvious break-in, but small, carefully calculated amounts. 3 cookies from the jar instead of the full dozen. A single apple from the fruit bowl that held 6. The last slice of leftover pizza when Hannah had been saving it for lunch. It was as if someone was trying to stay just below the threshold of certainty. The couple installed a sophisticated security system, complete with motion sensors and cameras covering every entry point. The system never reported any breaches, and the cameras never captured unexpected movement. Yet Hannah would find fresh crumbs on the kitchen counter that hadn't been there when she went to bed, water droplets around the bathroom sink that neither of them had left, the hand soap dispenser slightly lower than she remembered. The intrusions left traces that seemed to fade under direct scrutiny, like trying to catch a shadow in your peripheral vision. The scent of unfamiliar cologne would linger in the hallway, but dissipate before Hannah could decide if she'd actually smelled it. The shower curtain would be damp when both she and Arthur had been out all day. The mirror would hold traces of condensation in patterns that suggested someone had wiped a small circle to peek through. One evening, Hannah noticed something that made her blood run cold. The family photos they'd hung in the hallway had been subtly rearranged. Their wedding portrait, which had hung in the center, was now slightly askew, as if someone had brushed against it while walking past. But more disturbing was the realization that all the photos had been adjusted to hang exactly 1 inch higher than before. She could see the original nail holes behind the frames. When she showed Arthur the photo adjustments, he finally admitted his own unsettling experiences. His ties, which he organized by color, would be arranged by pattern instead. His shoes, always lined up neatly in the closet, would be paired differently. Someone had been spending time in their bedroom, methodically altering their possessions according to their own system of order. Their next-door neighbors, the Hendersons, proved to be an unsettling fountain of information. Eleanor Henderson, a retired librarian with sharp eyes and a sharper memory, remembered the house's model home phase in vivid detail. Over coffee that Hannah couldn't bring herself to finish, Eleanor described how popular the house had been, with hundreds of potential buyers walking through during open houses. The builder had used it as their flagship property, hosting countless events and showings. Each visitor had been given a key to simulate the homeownership experience, a marketing gimmick that had apparently worked well for sales, but created an ongoing security nightmare. Eleanor's husband, George, mentioned that during those 6 months, the house had never been truly empty. People would come at all hours to tour the property, sometimes staying for hours to get a feel for the space. When Hannah pressed for more details about the previous owners, the Hendersons' story diverged sharply from from Miss Reynolds's tale of an overseas relocation. The last owners, the Kravitz family, had moved out abruptly after just 4 months, leaving many of their belongings behind. They'd broken their mortgage agreement, seemingly willing to take the financial hit rather than stay another night. Eleanor recalled hearing arguments through the walls in the weeks before they left, not between family members, but about others in the house. The Hendersons weren't the only neighbors with stories. The couple across the street remembered regular complaints about missing items and strange noises. The family 2 doors down described how the Kravitz children refused to sleep in their own rooms, claiming other people used them at night. Each neighbor's account added another layer of unease to the house's history. Most disturbing was the pattern Hannah discovered. The house had changed hands 4 times in the past 3 years, with no family staying longer than 6 months. Each time, the sale price dropped further below market value, as if the house were slowly admitting its true cost, not in dollars, but in peace of mind. The intrusions escalated with an almost methodical precision. Hannah began finding doors open that she distinctly remembered closing, not just ajar, but opened to exactly the same angle each time. The kitchen lights would be on in the morning, though both she and Arthur insisted they'd turned them off. And not just on, but dimmed to exactly 65% brightness, a setting neither of them used. Their routines began to shift unconsciously, adapting to the unseen presence. Hannah started waiting an extra hour to shower in the morning, after the bathroom mirror would inexplicably fog up around dawn. Arthur began leaving his laptop at the office, tired of finding his documents rearranged into meticulous folder systems he hadn't created. They stopped buying groceries in bulk, knowing that items would vanish steadily until exactly half remained. The breaking point came on a Tuesday morning in March. Hannah woke to find wet footprints leading from their master bathroom to the bedroom window, footprints that were too small to be Arthur's and too large to be her own. They formed a perfect line, each print exactly 6 inches apart, as if measured. When she followed them to the window, she discovered it unlocked and raised precisely 3 inches from the sill. Arthur finally contacted the real estate agency, demanding answers about the model home period. Miss Reynolds's uncomfortable silence on the phone spoke volumes. When she finally responded, her voice trembled as she admitted that during the 6 months of showings, over 800 sets of keys had been distributed. While buyers were supposed to return them after viewing the property, only about 60% had done so. The builder had changed the locks, of course, but they had no way of knowing how many visitors had made copies before returning their keys. More disturbing was Miss Reynolds' final admission. Some potential buyers had spent entire nights in the house, treating it as their own home before making an offer. Many had rearranged furniture, stocked the refrigerator, and settled into routines. For some, she whispered, turning in the keys hadn't meant giving up their attachment to the house they'd dreamed of owning. Hannah and Arthur hired the most reputable locksmith in town, a gruff, older man named Frank, who'd been changing locks in Oakwood Heights for 30 years. As he worked on their doors, his weathered hands moved with practiced efficiency, but his expression grew increasingly troubled. The brass shavings from the new cylinders scattered across his work mat like tiny fallen stars, each one representing another layer of security that somehow felt inadequate against their invisible intruders. After finishing the 3rd lock, he stepped back and cleared his throat, seeming to debate whether to share what was on his mind. His calloused fingers traced the old key marks around the deadbolt, reading them like braille that told the house's secret history. Finally, Frank revealed that he'd changed the locks on this house 8 times in the past 3 years. Each time, the owners had reported the same things: missing food, rearranged items, lights turning on and off. He'd even been called by the Kravitz family at 3 a.m. once, only to arrive and find their furniture completely rearranged to match the original model home layout exactly, down to the angle of the coffee table books. The locksmith pulled out his phone, showing them photos from previous lock changes. In each image, they could see subtle changes to the house: different paint colors, various furniture arrangements, changing decor. But one detail remained constant. A particular armchair in the living room always ended up in the same spot, no matter how many times the owners moved it. Hannah felt her stomach drop as she realized their own furniture had gradually shifted over the past months, until that same chair occupied that exact position. Frank explained that during the model home period, one potential buyer, a retired interior designer named Margaret Chen, had visited the house daily for almost the entire 6 months. She had treated the house as her own, meticulously arranging and rearranging each room until achieving what she called perfect harmony. She would spend hours adjusting furniture by fractions of inches, organizing cabinets, and carefully curating each space as if she were conducting a silent orchestra of objects. Margaret had made an offer well above asking price, but the builder had accepted an even higher bid from an investment firm. She had turned in her key with trembling hands, but Frank's voice grew quiet as he added that she had passed away just 2 weeks later. The police had found her in her small apartment, surrounded by photographs of the house and detailed drawings of furniture arrangements, all featuring that same armchair, positioned exactly where it now stood in the Wilsons' living room. That night, Hannah and Arthur sat in their living room, every light blazing against the darkness. The new locks offered little comfort as they finally admitted the full truth to each other. The house had never belonged to just them. Each rearranged item, each adjusted thermostat setting, each carefully folded towel had been a message. This space belonged to everyone who had ever dreamed of calling it home. A sound drew their attention to the kitchen, the soft clink of a coffee mug being placed in the sink. This time, Hannah had enough. She grabbed her phone to document everything and marched towards the kitchen, Arthur following close behind. The room appeared empty, but her phone's camera revealed something else entirely. Dozens of translucent figures moving purposefully through their kitchen, each going about their own routine as if they were the rightful owners. Every potential buyer who had once held a key, all existing in their own version of the perfect home, simultaneously. The figures didn't acknowledge Hannah and Arthur. They simply continued their endless routines, some cooking phantom meals, others arranging invisible place settings. In the center of it all stood an elderly Asian woman they recognized from Frank's description, Margaret Chen, making minute adjustments to items only she could see, orchestrating her perfect harmony. As Hannah lowered her phone with trembling hands, the physical world began to align with these phantom dimensions. Cabinet doors opened and closed on their own. Drawers slid out and in. The temperature dropped exactly 2 degrees. The microwave display flickered to 3:33 a.m., even though Hannah's phone showed 11:47 p.m. On the counter, keys materialized one by one, each landing with a soft metallic ping, until hundreds lay arranged in a perfect mandala pattern. In the center of this key pattern, a final key appeared, the original model home key they somehow knew. As Arthur reached for it, Margaret's figure turned toward them for the first time. Her voice echoed as if from every corner of the house. Perfect harmony requires perfect sacrifice. The house must be shared. Always. The implications hit the them at once. They could stay, but only if they accepted their role as just another layer in the house's endless parade of owners. Their routines would join the phantom procession. Their movements would align with the endless choreography of previous occupants. They would become both owners and intruders, existing simultaneously with every other person who had ever claimed this space as their own. 3 days later, Miss Reynolds listed 47 Oakwood Heights Drive again, explaining to potential buyers how the previous owners had relocated suddenly. She didn't mention finding Hannah and Arthur's phones on the kitchen counter, arranged in perfect parallel lines, endlessly playing videos of empty rooms where their cameras had captured something else entirely. She wouldn't speak of the hundreds of keys now fused into a sculptural mandala on the kitchen counter, impossible to move or separate. And she certainly wouldn't mention how, through the windows at night, dozens of shadows could be seen moving through their perfect routines, including 2 new ones that looked remarkably like the Wilsons. The house stands today, eternally welcoming new owners while never truly letting go of the old ones. And if you ever visited during its model home phase, perhaps you'll feel a familiar tug when you pass by, your own version of the perfect home calling you back to join its harmonious dance of endless occupation. Subscribe for more chilling tales from the Nightmare Maestro.